Jimmy was kind enough to have me look at his page for his MyInterest project, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. As I go through the page, I keep in mind this criteria. I start off by checking for mechanics. I look at content, spelling and grammar, and design. So first off, it looks like his design is pretty good as far as he changed his font, which is cool. But I see that my color scheme from my original CSS document is still the same. So that all needs to be changed. He's got some responsive design stuff happening, which is cool. But again, it's my color scheme. I do a search on his source code. I can see that he renamed it to watersports.css, which is cool. But as I look at the styling, I can still see my 1942 font, which he's not using, so it should be gotten rid of. The Alex brush must be his new one, which is cool. And he used that appropriately here. That was good. Everywhere that it says change this, that needs to be changed. So those are my original colors. They all need to be changed. And then he should get rid of this comment all throughout the CSS. His indenting looks good on this page. So I look at the background page. Got a picture and a title for the picture, which is good. I'm not a big fan of the squiggly font for all the text. I would say having it up there for the navigation is good, and maybe even the picture title, although it's a little bit much, but definitely not this text down here. I'd also like to see some padding between the words right there and the side of the page. I see he's got barefooting and human ski, so I can tell all of his site is about water skiing and water sports, it says right there. So that was good. And he has multiple pages, which is good. He's got a link that says videos, plural, but he only has one video. So I would recommend changing that to video or putting more than one video in. I watched the video earlier. It takes a little bit of time to get going. It's pretty cool once it gets going. And that's pretty cool that you're a human water ski. Overall, I would say that's a little bit light on content because there's like a sentence or two, maybe 3 or 4 on each page, but there's not a whole lot of text. Some of the stuff could go together probably. It just feels a little bit light on content. At the bottom of the page, I see he's got Jimmy Paxton Project 2 for a footer, and that's probably okay. Again, I'd like to see some color changes and some other style changes, maybe different padding, different margins, something like that. I checked his pages with the spell checking, and you see it found a problem with barefooting, and I'm not even sure what that word is because it's a little hard to read. Basers. So that's a water skiing term, I assume, so that would be okay. So his spelling in general looked pretty good. But again, there's not a whole lot of text to check the spelling on. His pictures are responsive. Interesting that you've got a little space there. I'd probably extend that or put some padding or something like that. Usually you don't want to have your content go right to the very edge of the screen either. Definitely need a new color scheme up there and for the backgrounds. And then the background color changing from there to there is also probably not necessary. I also did a check with Wave, and I can see I've got 6 contrast errors, which are all with his titles, his menu navigation system. So he'll want to keep that in mind when he changes that. So all in all, I ran my auto checker on it for mechanics, and all of his pictures were good sizes. They're all under half a megabyte. They were all 1024 pixels wide or less. So he did a good job on his pictures. While looking at mechanics, I didn't see any HTML or CSS errors. On content, I said minus 10% because there's not quite enough. It's pretty good, but could use a little bit more. Spelling and grammar, I took off 30% because, again, not quite enough spelling or grammar to check. Keep in mind as you add spelling that you want to make sure you don't have any typos. And then design, I said minus 50% did not modify the CSS enough or at all to make it uniquely yours, because he's clearly using mine except for the font. I said I like the font for the titles, but it's a little hard to read for the other content. And for a final grade, I would say 10% and 30 and 50 is a minus 90%, so he should get a 10%, which would be 1 out of 10. But I typically look at the site as a whole and go, well, it looks like he put effort into it and it does look pretty decent. So on this particular site, I would give him a 50% and a 5 out of 10 with up to a C or a regrade request. Let's say this was a regrade request. Just so you know, I'm not super lenient on regrade requests. In fact, this 50% would not happen on a regrade request. I would take the actual numbers. So if it was 10, minus 30, and minus 50%, a regrade request would get 10%, which would be 1 out of 10. And I would say your grade can't go down on a regrade request. And it would still be what it was. Now, if he had done better, let's say he was at 50%, and he had no problems here, and that was good, and he had 4 problems here, no, let's say 3 problems here, and he had 1 problem here, that would be minus 40%, so his grade would go up to a 60%. So I would use that exact number. Again, I'm more lenient on the initial grade and more stringent on the regrade requests. So hopefully that's helpful to you as you work on your second project.